It's the Battle of Diu. D-I-U, it's the Battle of Diu. Hello everyone, how are we doing? Let's see. Ba-da-da-ding. Hello. The Battle of Diu. I do like this battle, but I'm going to change this this camera angle just a tad. Just a tad. That's better. That's better. Ooh. Just to make it slightly easier. This is the trouble with switching between recordings of different, slides and presentations. Some of them are better at different levels. So, hello everyone, how are we doing? Let's get back to the top and say hello. Hello Bichon, hello Jess P, hello Peter Dawson, hello DG40, hello Jack Ray, hello Carl McGasberg, hello George Newman, hello Nordic Wolf, hello M35 Benwards, hello Albazaski, hello Yieldy Sage, hello John Shea, hello everyone, hello Di Filippino, and hello Stephen Richards, hello Night 681, hello Submarine History, hello everyone. Right then, so tonight is the Battle of Diu. And I have billed it as the Forgotten Trafalgar because, frankly, it is. Hello Tasha Vashal and Carl McGasberg, hello. Hope you're all well. So, the Battle of Diu. It's one of those battles which, frankly, doesn't get talked about that much or enough, because, as I've gone into in the recorded discussion, which will come out on Saturday, which I recorded earlier today, basically the wrong people are taking part in it for it to get talked about enough. Hello, Will Atkins. Good morning, down under. Hello, Matthias Slavic. Hello. So, the Battle of Diu. Why does it matter? Because in 1509 it decides the fate of the Indian Ocean, or rather the Indian Ocean portion of the spice trade. Which, this is going to sound strange, but from that moment on, decides the fate of Mamluk Egypt, of the Ottoman Empire, of most of the Middle East. Because the Middle East had thrived based on being part of the global commercial network, that existed before this. The real thing is that the 1509 happens is this is the beginning of the transition of the global network from a sea and land network to a maritime network. 97% of trade by volume, 90% by value, goes by sea. For the UK, for the globe, it is not far off that. If you want to move something a long distance and it's heavy, it goes by sea. Yes, you do move things across America, etc., by rail and all these things, and I do acknowledge that, but at some point, most of these goods will travel by sea. The Battle of Diu is what signals the beginning of the long-distance maritime age. Because up until this point, everything had gone through its region by its own particular route. In some regions, it went by sea. In some regions, it went by land. But there were these entrepôts, these places which acted as the links between regions. Egypt was one of them. Persia. Byzantium. Constantinople. Istanbul. Was another. Venice was one. To an extent, Genoa. All of these places were, to a lesser or greater extent, maritime hubs or trading hubs, which their regions moved between them. After the Battle of Diu, it becomes quite common for you to skip those hubs. You to go as close as you could from source. Oh, I've run out of water. It's terrible. What do I have in terms of liquid to drink while talking to you all? God, all I have is iron brew. Oh, that's terrible. I'll have to have some iron brew. And it is, as Knights was pointed out, before the Suez Canal. Yes. Even before the Suez Canal, Egypt was a trading hub. What would happen is the ships would get as high at the Red Sea as they could, and they would cross by land to Alexandria and Cairo and Alexandria mainly, and would go across the sea from there. That's how it worked. Hello, Zachary Gherkin. Hello, Colin Cameron. Hello, Dirt Squad. And hello, Seneca Nero. I thought I said hello to you. Hello, Ollie L. And yeah. I'm sure I said hello to you, Dirt Squad. But didn't, I do apologize. And it took place on the February the 3rd in 1509. This is why we're doing this discussion today, because today it's the 513th anniversary of the Battle of Diu, which is rather cool. Hello, Felix B. No, I'm not doing Iron Brew all the time, Dirt Squad. It's good for me not to. Besides, I'm back in the gym, so I can't do Iron Brew all the time. Oh, I have to live off water. Anyway, here is the spice fruit. This is what we're talking about when we talk about the spice fruit. And the first thing I want to emphasize is it's not just east to west trade. It's also west to east. I go into this far more in the long patrol, but I'm going to make this point here, which is, it's a boring economic point, but it needs to be made. It's a very stupid and poor merchant who decides they're just carrying goods from one place to another and then money back. That doesn't make you anything. That doesn't help you. So there is no trade, there is no spice route if there are not goods going both ways. Goods have to go both ways. Because what a merchant does is they buy something in one country, they take it all the way to another one, sell it. And then they buy something else using the money made there and take it all the way back to this one and sell it and make it even more profit. And they just keep doing that, going backwards and forwards, making profit and investing their profit if they're sensible. So they have other sources of income and diversify their money. But this is the point. And this is some of the early spice fruit. This is the Roman spice fruit in India, in the Indian Ocean. Okay? This used to be plied by Roman ships. Probably wondered why the Roman Empire always seems to does sort of whoop that down around by the Red Sea. And the whole reason is so they could get round Persia, because they didn't like Persia. And they wanted to trade with the East and be able to connect to the spice route without having to go through Persia, because then they'd have to pay taxes to the Persians. They didn't want to do that. So they went down that. And this is the foundation. We always hear about how the Eastern Empire ends up being richer than the Western Empire when Rome is split into two empires. And the reason is not because the Eastern Empire, well, not only because the Eastern Empire is on incredibly fertile and wonderful in terms of food production areas of the world, but also because it's the center of trade, all the trade going through it. It can be taxed. Especially if you can provide security, if you can provide safety for that area, you can tax them. And this trade network is massive. This is the trade network for Southeast Asia out of India. And of course, at the top is the big map. The big map showing it's coming from China, it's coming from Southeast Asia, and going to Europe. Now, as you can see, the Europe arrow is pretty much heading to Genoa, not to Venice. But in reality, Venice was far more of a important part of it. In fact, the Europe arrow, you can say, is heading to Rome. Now, let's skip back. That's fine. There you go. This is the world you are dealing with. This is the world that the Portuguese and the Spanish are plunging themselves into. They are not going hunting for new worlds. They're going hunting for existing trade networks. Bankers and governments don't give money to people to go off and investigate things which will probably fail. They only give them money to people who they think are going to have a good certainty of come back with success. India is known about. The East is known about. The trade bounties of the East are well understood, because to get these goods, you have to pay taxes to all these countries in between. They're not going off exploring. They're looking for shortcuts around the taxes. B. Dawson, what calendar are you using, Julian or Gregorian? It's on the modern calendar. Gregorian. Where is Diu? Diu is on the coast of India. Cody 85. Wasn't there a channel before the Suez Canal? I keep hearing there was an older channel. Not really. There are networks of things which can be used, but there's not really a channel before the Suez Canal. Not really as we were. Not really for big ships and things to go through, or even little ships, really. Hello, Felix B. Remember, is this the route the Cutty Sark ran? The Cutty Sark ran the route from all the way from China, which up here, down around India, around Southeast Asia, around India, down around Africa, and up north. So yes, it is pretty much is the spice route. It's still what it's doing. They're doing. Yeah. That blue route's not good. Still, but mostly red. Basically, the blue is the Nile. So there's a little bit of they'd be taken across land to the Nile. How the goods would go through Egypt, because that's causing discussion. Is you would get into the coast of the Red Sea, coast of Egypt, overland it to the Nile, and then float it down the Nile. But again, the Nile can be tempestuous as to whether or not it's going to have water in it. Does good. Royals sometimes give money to people to go away and leave them alone. Happens to sink and drown in the process. Oh well. Yeah, but that's usually one ship, not a whole fleet. And their banker friends and the other members of the nobility don't tend to get involved. So, when the Portuguese arrived in the Indian Ocean, when they started trying to get round Persia, get round the Ottoman Empire, the growing Ottoman Empire, the Byzantine Empire to an extent, that sort of preceded it and was still sort of fluttering along at this point. Sort of, not really, no, it's mostly gone. And, of course, the Egyptian Mamluks. Well, they send off Vasco da Gama. Vasco is one of my favourite characters of history. I do have a lovely leather-bound book somewhere, which I got, which is The Voyages of Vasco da Gama. And I remember studying him in a class where I was taught by a very good lecturer, Dr. Claire Norton. This was when I was doing my bachelor's. And Dr. Norton was a specialist in Middle East, Far East, sort of. She was very focused on that area. And she had a very clear understanding of why they'd gone where they went to. And there was no thing. There is no hesitation at this point. We treat it as the amount of people I read who go, oh, and it was a great leap into the unknown from Melindi to Calicut. No, if you look at this map here, you'll see there looks like there's already a bit of there's arrows, sort of arrows going across. And if you look especially down at this lovely this map on the right of your screen, you'll see there's pretty much a trade route going from Melindi straight to India. It's certainly angled that way. And the thing is, there were ships which went that way. So it's not really as much a leap into the unknown as you might imagine. Certainly, it's a lot less of a leap into the unknown than the voyages he'd done here. There's a reason he keeps going out and in, out and in, out and in, following the coast. And then it's a leap across the ocean to India. Well, as his navigation up there points out, he's not going to really do that unless he's sure of where he's going. If you look at how he goes through the Atlantic and all the other things, he knows where he's going. When he doesn't know what he's going, he does small ins and outs. When he does know where he's going, he does a big leap. Along the spice and silk road, silk and spices would go westward. Wools, gold and silver would go east. Wool was especially important. The other goods, certain woods would go east. Certain manufactured products would go east. A lot of wool. The spices which came back to Europe were especially black pepper was popular. Salt would go in both directions somehow. I'm honestly not sure why they're bringing salt from one part of the world to salt to another part. Salts from one part of the world to another part of the world that has salt and just sending it to the other part of the world. I have no idea why salt is going back as well. I know salt's always in demand, but I'm presuming the salt process and the salt flavoring is not that different in one part of the world to the other part of the world, so I'm presuming salt is salt. So why you're carrying it across both ways, I have no idea. I'm a historian. I am not a culinary specialist. That is not my area of history to understand why you be taking salt from China, salt from India seems to be, to Europe, and salt from Mainly, it seems to be from Spain and the Netherlands to India. I have no idea why. I'm just reading off these notes. I'm going, yeah, that just confused me. Salt was the bottled water of them and the age. Yes. That's a bit of a... There's a lot of fun with that one. Hello, Stafford. Oh, yeah. That's good. That's good. I remember hearing a thing about the Pharaohs occasionally thinking about a channel from Nile to the Red Sea. Never happened, but was an idea like the Irish Sea Bridge. Yeah, it's an idea which pops up. The Irish Sea Bridge will probably, if it's ever built, will be turned into the Irish Sea Tunnel, and it will be a train tunnel like the Channel Tunnel. So, in the nicest way, it's kind of like the Channel Tunnel was a channel bridge up until they actually looked at the building and went, tunnel. When they start buying some tunneling equipment, then you'll know they're actually serious about it. Akenbago, stop disturbing my World WNC console session. You're invisible, you were interesting videos. We try. Who is dumb enough to run a Panzer? Let's do it. Oh, good. Oh, we're not getting into that one. That's what. What's that you say? Vasco da Gama didn't fancy dying of starvation and dehydration lost in the middle ocean. No, he didn't. None of them did. This is the point. Oh, listen to it. I know when I really laugh because I shake everything around me. Grace Sasky. That's good. People will pay extra for exotic salt. I can't. Maybe saltpeter too. A little bit, perhaps, but they're just talking about salt at this point. Hello, XO9XB, I think. Oliel, there are many different types of edible salt, let alone inedible mineral salts with environmental contributing a lot. Flavor, texture. Yeah, okay, well, I'll accept that all, but I still think it's just sodium chloride going back with the... Oh. Right. Hello, Big British. It turns out a lot of things must flow. Yes. So, Vasco da Gama goes out, and this is him leaving Lisbon, and the other picture is him arriving in Calicut. Now, Calicut is important. It is a center of trade and an economic hub. The thing is, it has an advantage for the Portuguese. It's unfortified. Whereas Goa has quite a large set of fortifications and a fairly large and well-trained army nearby it. Calicut doesn't. And Calicut is a center point of trade. Again, if we go back to here, you can see it's one of the points featured on the blue map. It's one of the points which is featured on the Roman map. It's one of the points featured on the map on the bottom of the right, bottom right of the screen. Calicut is important. And just happens to find it. And also goes and trades in Goa. It's wonderful. Doesn't have a necessarily the best time, but manages to get things done okay and get home. So, what else has been going on in the world this time? Well, there's been the Treaty of Tordesillas. Now, Tordesillas is an interesting treaty. It's a wonderful treaty. If you're Spain and Portugal, because then it divides the world up between you. It's wonderful. Small issue, you might be thinking. Small issue. If you're Venice or Genoa, which are both powerful Italian city-states, not that far from Rome, where, of course, the Vatican is, and you depend on your global trade networks, how are you going to react to, I don't know, Portugal being given your global trade network? Because let's be honest, this is what's happened here. And it'll be interesting. It's interesting. And by the way, there are many people who will tell you ardently that Spain got the best of this deal. They didn't. Look at Portugal. They've got the whole of India. They've got the whole of Africa. They've got the whole of Asia. What has Spain got? The Pacific Ocean. Which would you rather? The whole world or the Pacific Ocean? Okay, it's very spacious, but it's mostly a large expanse of salt water. This, lots of people you can trade with and tax. Salt water, trade and tax. Salt water, trade and tax. Who do we think did better in this deal? Oh, and by the way, just to add to it, Portugal also got Brazil. Let's be honest, they got Brazil. Now, this was the Pope's cunning plan to stop Spain and Portugal fighting over the New World, i.e. South America. Not North America, no one wanted to go there. South America. South America looked actually civilizable in their sort of phraseology at the time, and seemed to have plenty of gold. Very attractive. It's always good to find gold. We like gold, and we like silver. We like spices too. Portugal, they get India, because, well, you haven't found India by going that way. Or rather, that way. That way. That way, yeah. So they're going to go try and find India by going that way. And they do! They find India! Immediately, at which point, Portugal, the King of Portugal, sends the King of Spain a note saying, "Ha ha! My navigators actually can find India when they set out for it. Ha ha! Should have taught geography in your schools. Ha ha! Spain are losers. Ha ha! Portugal forever. Ha ha! You wusses. Ha ha! I win." Sadly enough, the Richards, you're right. It's kind of cruel. This is the point at which, if I have any Spanish and Portuguese students in the room when I'm teaching this class at universities, I usually tone the language down a little bit on it, but they're usually the Portuguese students are giggling and the Spanish ones are looking slightly mutinous. Because they're going, but we had this massive empire, we were this great state. Yes, but Portugal, look what they got, you look what you got. Oh. Calicut is also close to cinnamon and cinnamon. Yes, it is. And cinnamon's important to the Portuguese. Hello, Captivace. That's God. The latest 900,000 spent on the Irish Sea Bridge Tunnel was to pay the engineers for the time they spent laughing at the suggestion. We could all that. Cameron, if you want to talk about tax on moving goods, you should look at how much you would have paid taking cheese from Parma to London in the 1700s. Ooh, cheese. That's an important good. That's good. Spain got the guaranteed profit in American gold and silver. Only if they could get it back past the English pirates. That's the other advantage. Spain's trade all has to go across the Atlantic, and there is the English and Dutch pirates. Portugal's trade can go, well, south, away from the pirates. They also got the Azores and various other cool islands out of it. It's fun times. It is fun times. But most importantly, Venice and Genoa are round out of it. And they're upset by this. So, when I start introducing this as economic warfare, and this is a trade war, it's going to be dressed up. There is a lot of sources which will dress this up as religious warfare. There is one problem with that. The Allies, as I call them on one side, they're backed by Venetian gold and Venetian technology, which is a Catholic power. They also have Genoan gold, taking part in it, it seems, to support the Mamluk Egypt ships. And they themselves have a mixture of personnel from Muslim and Hindu states in India. Sort of as one side. And the Portuguese, well, they have backing from a Hindu pirate / admiral, possibly Muslim turned Hindu, we're not quite sure, who has roughly 2,000 sailors under his command and his own ships. So, these things are interesting times. And again, you very much get the view that this is about control of trade routes because it allows you control of the trade. Okay? It's control, it's how to make money in a mercantilist world. And yeah. The Portuguese make a lot of money, especially thanks to Alonso de Albuquerque, who is an interesting soul. But it goes on for a few years, and it's sort of successful. You then have what's called the Second India Armada, launched under Pedro Alvarez Cabral. Now, Cabral is... how do I say this in polite terms which don't make me sound like I'm calling him an idiot? He is not a diplomat. He is potentially a fairly decent sailor. But as you can see from the words there, friction and massacre at the top, you can guess what his lack of, should I say, diplomatic and strategic nuance lead to. So, he takes a force of roughly 13 ships, of which about 6 seem to actually make it to India. He manages on his way out to India to discover Brazil. Woohoo! And he does this by accidentally, instead of going at the same route Vasco da Gama does when coming out from Portugal and going down to Cape, doing sort of that, he does that and bumps into Brazil. So, Pedro Alvarez Cabral, discoverer of Portuguese Brazil. Well, hey. Now, they got Brazil. That's lovely. Now, what else have they got? Well, they keep going. He goes to India. And in India, he doesn't necessarily have the best time. Okay? In India, he comes to Calicut. And he reaches there in September. And he's greeted by gaily decorated native boats and all sorts of beautiful welcoming. Now, you and I can all be slightly suspicious by the fact that ships come out to welcome you. I'm presuming there might have actually been just a normal festival going on when they arrived, and they just thought it was welcome for them. Because in my experience, people don't tend to put on that big a show for you turning up if you're just turning up with a trade merchant ship fleet. You're just basically a merchant fleet turning up to trade. You're a heavily armed merchant fleet. You're the modern equivalent of the Vikings, who go on very large armed shopping excursions, which occasionally turn violent, but that is what you are. You're a merchant fleet. He immediately, because of the Gama's experience, refuses to go ashore until hostages have been exchanged. This is because he doesn't trust the Zarin of Calicut. Zamarin of Calicut, the ruler, mainly because, frankly, he hasn't proved that trustworthy in his previously. He's also not going to prove that bright long term, but we'll leave it to one side. Squad, is this the guy who decided that a chili was a lovely looking, refreshing fruit? I think it might have been, but we'll leave that to one side. Anyway, so he tries to get on with Zamarin. They exchange hostages. They have a negotiation. Negotiation's complete, and Cabral presents Zamarin with finer and more luxurious gifts than Gama had brought, and more personal and respectful personalized and respectful letters of address from King Manuel I of Portugal. All very nice. Commercial treaties negotiated. Zamarin gives Cabral a security of trade certificate, which is literally etched on a silver plate. I mean, there's being born with a silver spoon on your mouth and being given silver spoon in your mouth, and there's being given a trade treaty etched on a silver plate. You're gonna start thinking you got good things coming to you. Anyway, they set up a Fertoria, or a factory, in Calicut. Arias Corellia is put in charge, and he's given 70 men to sort out, and they start buying spices. And once the factory's set up, Cabral releases the ship hostages as a sign of trust, and Correa sets around buying spices in Calicut's markets for the ships to take home. It's all going okay. It's all going to plan. Set up a factory ashore, a warehouse that we can store these things in while we're sorting and moving stuff away, so we don't have to keep the ships tied up to shore the whole time and, cost ourselves and block trade going in a port. We can do things all politely. Everything's going in and out. In October, the Zamarin dispatched a request to Cabral. Arab merchants were allied with a rival city-state, Cochin, were returning from Ceylon with a cargo of war elephants destined for the Sultan of Cambay. Claiming it to be an illegal contraband, Zamarin asked for them to be intercepted. He wanted victory. So Cabral goes, well, that's not really my job, but I don't mind. Sent one of his caravels under Pedro de Ated to capture it. Zamarin goes down to the beach hoping to see the engagement, but the Arab ship managed to slip past Ated. So he's upset about that one. Zamarin wanted to see it, but it's disgusted and upset when it doesn't, succeed in front of him. There, after which, Ated gave chase, caught up to it near Cananor, and successfully seized the vessel. And so Cabral was able to present the captured ship with its nearly intact elephant cargo. I think one of the elephants was killed, to Zamarin as a gift. And that's October. So September they've arrived. October they've done this. you know, Cabral must be feeling that things are going pretty well. He thinks he's happy. Unfortunately, Ares Korea was only able to buy, by December, enough spices to load 2 of the 6 ships. That's a problem. This was because the Arab merchants in Calicut were applying the same technique they'd used to drive out Chinese merchants earlier in the 15th century from various ports on the Malabar coast. And that was to basically shut them out by purchasing all the spices and making sure they couldn't get into trade. Korea complained to Cabral. Cabral went to complain to Zamarin and requested that he crack down on the Arab merchant guilds or enforce the Portuguese priority in the spice markets, as was set out in the criteria earlier in the discussions and in the trade negotiations. So, he's just asking for things to be done as they're supposed to be, which you can accept. Zamarin refuses this. Now, which Cabral find upsetting because he'd done when Zamarin asked him to hunt down a ship, he'd send a ship off to hunt down a ship. He's asking just for fair trade, in his view. Now, what Cabral does next is the bit which is stupid. Okay? So Cabral decides, on the advice of Ares Korea, to seize an Arab merchant ship from Jeddah, which had already been loaded up with spices. Now, the thing is, if I'd been going to start seizing ships in an enemy port, I think I'd have done, well, you can think about the options. Would you do A, and please put in the chat if you have a response to this, A, would you leave all your people ashore without any giving extra guards? B, send extra troops ashore to protect your people ashore in case of repercussions? Or C, evacuate those people ashore you can to make sure you have the minimal number of people there and ensure there is an escape route made out for the people who are ashore so they can quickly get to your ships, which are the safe zone. Please put in there in the chat whether you do A, B, or C. Remember, A is do nothing. B, put guards ashore. C, extract everyone you can and ensure escape route for people ashore. Those are your options, A, B, or C. Let's hear them in the chat. Jack Ray, did the mic change? There was crackling and the sound changed. I have no idea why, but apparently it decided to change from Razer Siren Elite to USB microphone and now has changed back to Razer Siren Elite. So we'll leave that to one side. So we have a whole lot of people going for B, putting the troops ashore. A few people going for C. Some people saying A with the. A. There's a Fox, so D, do nothing. That was A, which was do nothing. Everyone going for quite a lot of people going for C, preferably C, else B. He chose A and didn't even tell the guy he'd agreed to it that he was doing it. So, guess what the results? So he attacked the ship on December 17th, and under claiming that as Zomrin had promised the Portuguese priority in the spice markets, the cargo was rightfully theirs. Not really sure. But either way, the Arab merchants were incensed by this because they had just been blocking out the Portuguese from trade naturally by stopping them having access and buying everything first and refusing to sell to them. And ensuring that any Hindus or anyone who did sell to them were beaten. This was an outrage. This was terrible. So the Arabs around the quay, the Arab merchants, raised the riot. Amazingly, they suddenly had these hordes of people appear in the middle of the day who weren't working or doing anything else, who were happy to go and riot. It's amazing. And these mobs were able to be directed. So all they did was attack the Portuguese factory. The Portuguese ships anchored out in the harbour and unable to approach the docks could only watch what unfolded. And after 3 hours of fighting, 53 up to possibly as many as 70 Portuguese were slaughtered by the mob, including Ares Correa, the factor, the secretary, Camina, and between 3 and 5 Franciscan friars. Around 20 Portuguese in the city managed to escape the riot by jumping into the harbour waters and swimming to the ships. And the survivors reported Cabral that Samarin's own guards were seen either standing aside or actively helping the rioters. At least one Portuguese, a man called Gonçalo Piexto, was sheltered from the mob by a local merchant and survived the massacre that way. Along with this, the Calicut authorities, under the order of Zamarin, then impound the Portuguese factory and all its wares within as payment for causing a riot. Now, here is the small problem. Remember what I said earlier about Calicut? It's not fortified. You have now sitting off your beach, off your harbour, a load of warships who are upset after having earlier felt impotent, and you have killed everyone and haven't got hostages. And they have a lot of artillery. So whilst that was definitely not the IQ power play you'd want from Cabral, Zamarin's response, or rather lack of actually responding quickly with some troops and sorting things out, made this pretty much immediately. And this is the beginning of the next decade-long war between Portugal and Zamarin of Calicut. And would ultimately have long-lasting results for the Malabar coast of India. Anyway, Cabral waited for redress from Zamarin. He gave him 24 hours. When this didn't arrive, Cabral seized roughly 10 Arab merchant ships in Danian harbour between December the 18th and 22nd. They confiscated the ship's cargoes, killed the crews, and burned the ships. Then accused Zamarin of sanctioning the riot, which, from the sounds of things, he had, or at least hadn't been able to do anything about, which is the same thing if you're supposedly the leader of the city. So Cabral ordered a full-day shore bombardment of Calicut, which did immense damage, understandably, to the city, which, as I mentioned earlier, unfortified. No fortifications. None whatsoever. Estimates of casualties in Calicut, some people put it at 600, but I think it was probably a little bit more. And I have a reason to think it's a little bit more, because basically afterwards they're said not to be able to unload ships for months. Cabral then also decided to bombard the nearby Zamarin-owned port of Pandan and a few other bits and pieces. Now, you might be thinking, hang on, Cabral is being a bit silly here because he's on his own. This is the only place he has an agreement with. Well, what was Zamarin's first mistake? Back in October, he'd asked Cabral to attack a ship which belonged to his enemy, Cochin. So where do you think Cabral goes? Cabral, leaving the smouldering Calicut, on the suggestion of Vasco da Gama, a Goese Jew who had accompanied the expedition, sailed south along the coast towards Cochin. A place which was partially in vassalage to and partly at war with Zamarin's own Calicut. They arrived there, and they went ashore. And the local Hindu prince was grateful to receive the Portuguese. They had, whilst they had stopped him getting war elephants, they'd just blown the bejesus out of Calicut. That's what he's been in the news. He's been waiting to hear from for years. He's ecstatic. My enemy's enemy is my friend scenario going on? Yes! This is like, I don't know. I can't really put it the equivalent of, but it's for the prince, the Hindu prince of Cochin, who is Triampara Raja, or Unigodavama, maybe. I'm never quite sure which is the name that sort of they call by. Of the Triampara Raja, who is Unigodavara Vama at the time. It was all his Christmases and I think it's Diwalis and everything else rolled into one. It was just brilliant. I will celebrate this forever. So they set up a factory in Cochin. They start working with Cochin. They're very happy. Georgian, they're mad because he beat them at their own game? Potentially. Shamak, they use their guns for anti-competitive practices rather than just using their natural wealth to do it. What horrible people. Yes. No. The leaders were definitely not the best. And it's interesting. The quality of leadership going on at this time were not particularly brilliant. Anyway, so here are some key personalities to understand the context of what we're going to be talking about. There is Manuel I, who is always pictured as this pious king, this lovely king, yet is the person who seems to add most to the Portuguese Empire. And frankly, I don't think I'd want to get into a fight with him because he does seem to do quite well. He's not always that brilliant though at reading the room, and he is, to an extent, he has problems with the politics going on around him. And Alfonso de Albuquerque, who, how do I put this quite politely, is the living embodiment of General Tacitus of the Terry Pratchett books, in that you leave him in somewhere and you will get letters from other places written in other people's blood, saying, you now control this country. Please, they are sending you, will be sending you tribute. Please send this amount of back pay. I'm going off to X country next. And you're sort of going, I'm sure you were supposed to be there. You're now up there, and you've been over there. Could you please do what you're supposed to do? Sure, Mac, burning those ships seems like a massive waste. It was, but they, he didn't have the crews to crew them, and frankly, he wasn't going to leave them there. But he could have taken them with him, could have towed them with him to Cochin, I suppose, and given them as a present to the Prince of Cochin. That would have been my trick, but there again, that might have made Cochin less reliant on him. Anyway, whilst in Cochin, he actually does fairly well. For some reason, having managed to blow up most of Calicut, which has been annoying. Most of the Vijayanagara area around it makes him a lot of friends. So, Alfonso de Albuquerque actually comes after. He doesn't get power till November. It doesn't really get, despite arriving earlier, doesn't get to be in charge till until November 1509. So he's not in charge in our time during time period frame, but he's the one who comes afterwards, and he builds on what a gentleman called Almeida does before him. Now, keeper alliance personalities. I haven't put in the Doge of Venice at this point because they are being, to a sort of extent, semi-discreet in their supplies, nor have I put the head of Genoa's government in here either. But you have this lovely painting from, as you can see, the late 19th century of what Zamarin of Calicut may have looked like. I have no doubt he looked nothing like that at all. And you have a contemporary, almost, portrait, I think, of Al-Sharif Khanif Al-Ghani, the Mamluk Sultan of Egypt. The Sultanate of Egypt, that's known for as being a naval power. They actually were quite a strong naval power. I'm not quite sure about Zarin, but, they were quite a strong naval power for their time. You remember, how do you blow up a town? A lot of gunpowder. A lot of gunpowder. Zescott, he's protecting the place he was told to by making everywhere in the vicinity a vassal state. Makes perfect sense. Yeah. These two individuals are powerful, but their power is dependent upon their ability to give stability and trade. This gentleman, in the nicest way, if I was in charge of a major trading town that like to have wars with my neighbors, you know what I'd have done? Fortified it. Before people start going, well, it's cannons, etc. They're not that powerful cannons. A decent wall network, which India could be more than built, more than capable of being built in India with the quality of engineers and engineering they had out there. And they still have out there. They're very good engineers in India. They could have built something and given themselves a wall which would have stopped most things. But there again, to be honest, he could have got control of it earlier on. In nicest way, if he's an on-the-ball leader, he'd have known what the Arab traders were up to and have probably gone, I don't want to upset the Arab traders. I don't want to upset the Portuguese with their cannon. They're all quite scary. I don't want them fighting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the Arab traders think they're winning on this one, but I'm going to secretly make sure that the Portuguese win enough to be happy. So the Arabs are going to think they're winning, and the Portuguese are going to win enough that they think they're happy. And therefore, both sides can have a nice economic battle in my town, and my town can get rich off it. That's how I'd have run it. But he didn't. As for the Mamluk Sultan of Egypt, it's just... Egypt has trouble. With the Ottoman Empire managing to strengthen its hold on its position, take over from Byzantium and the Byzantine Empire, and start pushing the trade through, providing security for the caravans, the sea trade route has already dropped down a bit. With less than 10 years of trade going on, by 1509, you have real dents going in the sea trade going to Egypt. And this means that in a state which is as difficult to run as Egypt ever is, they have serious financial trouble. Serious financial trouble. Now, the commanders. Now, I can only, this is going to sound strange, of the 5 admirals involved in the Battle of Diu, I can find pictures of 2 of them. So you have the 3rd in command of the Allied fleet here, which is Kunjali Maraka, who is in charge of he's in charge of the warboats of Calicut, so he's Zanuin's commander. And then is Don Francisco de Almeida, Viceroy of Portuguese India, 1505 to 9. A viceroy. Now, de Almeida is the one we're going to be talking about. He is a powerful personality. He is also quite possibly one of the people you really don't want to annoy at any point in history. How do I put this politely? How did the lovely people of Calicut manage to annoy Almeida? Well, they killed his son. And that meant that when Albuquerque turned up to replace him, he actually told Albuquerque he was refusing to hand over command until he got revenge. And he wouldn't be replaced as viceroy until then. And he had a fleet of these ships under his command to do that with. I do love these ships, so I'm going to keep this picture up here. I'm going to put it up here, and they're going to sit between the two. Oh. Anyway, he is an incredibly capable, and this is something Portugal is very blessed with at this point, capable commanding officers. He had been born somewhere around 1450. He'd die in 1510, so he's roughly 59, 60 years old at this point. He's he's taken part in all sorts of operations. In Africa, he's fought in conflicts in part of Morocco. He participated in the Christian conquest of Granada on the side of the Castilians. He took part in the Battle of Toro. He is a very experienced officer. He'd been a counselor of King John II of Portugal, as well as someone who was trusted by Manuel I. He builds a series of forts when he's in India. He really does. He sets up 4 forts on the southwest coast of India, 4 factory forts. Angevin Island, Cananore, Cochin, and Quilon. He had left Portugal with a fleet of 22 vessels and 1,500 men. And that was when he'd left in 1505. So he took quite a large force out of him. He is a fairly successful officer when he's out there. He does all sorts of operations and, well, for example, when he reaches Cochin in October 1505, he learns that the Portuguese traders at Quilon had been killed. So he sends his son, Lorenzo, with 6 ships to Quilon. There, Lorenzo destroys 27 Calicut vessels, while Almeida took up residence in Cochin and strengthened the Portuguese fortifications at Fort Manuel on Cochin, otherwise known as Fort Cochin or Fort Cochin in English. These forts are, some of them are still standing to this day, and you can go see them. They're really well built. There's a box in. Not to mention the great board of angelic successors had stabilized, so the steppe and Caucasus routes are back open, and with it the Silk Road is resurgent. Yes. So, he is motivated by that. He is a successful commander, and his son is killed, so he decides to go on a quest for revenge. The commanders on the other side. Well, you have Amir Hussein al-Kurdi, who is... how do I put this politely? He's a fairly decent admiral. He is sent to fight the Portuguese in the Indian Ocean, and he has a Pyrrhic victory, followed by defeat, followed by later on managing to win a victory. In 1517, but will eventually find himself quite literally murdered on the orders of the Ottoman Empire by his second in command. That's not this gentleman, though. Then you'll have the only one of the commanders in this battle who actually dies in his bed, happily and at peace, and rich. Malik Ayaz, who is the governor and naval officer in command of the city of Diu, on the mouth of the Gulf of Cambay and Cambay, and technically under the rule of the Gujarat Sultanate. Widely considered one of the most distinguished warriors of his time, certainly one of the best diplomats. A very successful and capable officer. A very successful and capable officer. And finally, we have the gentleman who's actually had a big, a bust of him made, which is quite nice. Now, he is technically he is an admiral of the Zamorin, King of Kosside, Calcut. It's an interesting title to inherit, and it's an interesting role to have, in that they seem to die rather quickly. This is third Kajari Makara. This is supposedly the one then at that time, but we're not quite sure if it is or isn't, honestly. I'm not sure from notes. Some notes seem to suggest yes, some not. But, yeah. They have fun. So, this is all the context. If I don't have a great big sailing caravel and carrack, then I can't go down and round Africa on a regular basis. But if I do, I can. And if you look at this map, you'll see that circumvents quite a lot of the issues. Because that means, well, if I'm really smart and really want to, I can take it from that coast of India, where there are entrepôts already, and already ports set up and infrastructure for me to offload ships, and take it all the way there, so I can skip out Persia, Arabia, Egypt, Greece, all the Ottoman Empire, and Italy. I can skip them all and make a lot of money. And remember, here is the thing. The goods have to have taxes paid on them all the way through there on their various different states, which is all money which adds up to the cost you're going to end up charging people. So people over here are used to paying a price which includes all that tax. All right, and the profit for the merchant. If my costs of getting round there, so here, are cheaper per ton, let's say, than the taxes, then I can afford to charge the same price, maybe even slightly less, and still make more money. It's about money. But the trouble is, that skips out all those states, and those states start to get annoyed. And that's what we've got going on here. This is what the problem is. We've had a decade of this going on. It takes a while for states to notice. The first time it happens, no one's worried about it. They'll have to repeat it again. The second time, that's a little bit problematic, but and it starts the war, of course, because the Arab traders at that point start to get off. But, that happens. By the time we've got to 10 years into it, that's when all the various levels are noticing it. When the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt has noticed it, or Cairo Sultanate as sometimes called, and Venice and those countries have started to notice it. They've started to notice it affecting them and their income. Mm-hmm. And it's started to affect them. And so that's what we've got going on. That's what we're talking about at this point. We're talking about the impact of trade on economics. So, the Battle of Diu is actually preceded by another battle. As I've said, his son was killed. Now, if I quickly disappear that off. Alright, that's the way around and get rid of that. Those are some of the ships sent to the Battle of Chaul. The Portuguese at this battle were led by Lourenço de Almeida, son of Don Francisco de Almeida. Now, before you start thinking Lourenço was in his position just because he's Don's son and all that stuff, actually, no. He's a fairly decent commander in his own right. He's a fairly experienced commander in his own right, mainly because, well, since he's been born, and he was born in 1480, so he's 28 years old when he has died, he's basically been following his father around. In fact, his first battle he's recorded as being in was when he was possibly when he was as young as 12 or 14, depending on when you consider really date his birth, because we think he was born somewhere around 1480. We don't have exact timelines. He distinguished himself in the Indian Ocean. In 1505, he managed to establish a settlement in Ceylon. So when he was 25, he was in command of the force that established the Portuguese mission in Ceylon and did it very well. So well that the Portuguese after that claimed Ceylon, was part of was almost entirely part of the Portuguese Empire. He defeated the Zamorin's fleet at the Battle of Cananor in 1506. And when I say defeated, he wiped it out. I think I earlier mentioned that he went down there with 6 ships, found 27 of the Zamorin's ships, which were galleys sort of things, and took them out. Every single one. Yes, overwhelming military firepower, but he's good at his job. Young, but decent. So, so in short, he went for a naval school like a typical British cadet in the age of sail. Yes. Pretty much, this is the thing. He's been at sea since he was in his tweens, with his dad, fighting in battles. So, in the nicest way, he's not when you sit there and go, he's 28, so young. And you should go, yeah, but he's got 16 odd years of experience by that point. Cascadian. Hello, Cascadian. Dr. Clarke, do you know any good war games for this time period? I can't remember its name. But someone produced something based on the Total War maps from the Total War empires and medieval period, but they produced it using Total War, the computer game series. Actually allowed them to use their maps for it, and I played it, and it was very good. But I cannot remember its name for the life of me. It was in one of the other PhD students at King's brought it in, and it was really quite cool. Anyway, so he gets caught by the Mamluk fleet under command of Amir Hussein al-Kurdi, who arrives from Malik Alis. Yes, and the battle goes on for 2 days. And so far, Mamluk has just lost ships. The Mamluks have just lost ships. And Ayaz is just sitting there watching them going, this is getting embarrassing. And Almeida is winning because the Mamluk fleet is coming in piecemeal and they're just being blasted away. Ayaz goes, right then, well, if we lose, I'm not going to look bad. So, fine. And Ayaz leads his ships in. And Ayaz is another experienced, very skilled naval warrior. He leads his galleases in, he keeps them in order, he's got them, and he's getting up to the ships, and he caused enough trouble that Almeida decides, right then, I'm going to bug out. I'm actually against someone who's got skill. I'm not stupid. He has more ships than me. He has more men than me. I am not going to stay. This is basically it's a case of right then we've been dealing with the riffraff. That's fine, but now the boss is coming and we're not in a place to fight the boss, so we're going to go. And Almeida tries to cover the rest of his ships escaping with his own ship by doing some very fancy navigation in the entrance to the harbour to basically. While the entrance there sort of going out of, he's trying to cover off so his other ships go behind him. Unfortunately, it seems to strike a rock or something, gets caught, and we're under the weight of fire it's already receiving, it goes down very quickly. And Almeida dies. Now, here is something which I always find interesting. Almost immediately, Hussein, who's lost lost a lot of ships, has to return to Diu, Ayaz's area, because that's the only place that can help to sustain him and protect him. But Ayaz takes the prisoners. Ayaz immediately starts recovering the sailors who have gone down from the ship which has gone down. He starts looking after them and refuses to hand them over to Hussein. Doesn't trust Hussein with any of the prisoners at all. There are also other issues. At one point, Hussein ends up having to sell all his cannon to Ayaz because he's run out of money to pay his sailors and pay for his ships. So, as he can't get money from the Sultan, because the Sultan's presumably running out of money because he hasn't got the tax income, and he doesn't want to return to the Sultan, going, we've failed. He has to. There's a debate as to whether he leases his guns to Ayaz or whether he sells his guns to Ayaz. Either way, that's not that great. I was asking, next time when your employer asks for 10 years of experience and you just graduated. Yeah, that's basically Lorenzo de Almeida here. Yeah. How do I put it in modern parlance so we'd all understand? It's there's very little scenario, but as I said, it's kind of like Ayaz's ships turning up are different. They are a completely different class to the Mamluk fleet. They are a completely different class to the others. And something interesting goes on later on in the next battle. Interesting at this point, despite the fact that Ayaz was in charge of the ships which actually caused the action, Almeida doesn't hold him responsible for what happened to his son. He doesn't hold him responsible. He holds the Zanoin and the Sultan of Egypt responsible. He doesn't hold Ayaz responsible, which is an interesting scenario to be in. Anyway, so now we have to consider what the fleets will be in the battle coming up. And the Battle of Diu will involve on the Mamluk Gujarat Calicut side, the alliance side, approximately 196 ships. Approximately 200 ships. 6 Mediterranean-style carracks and 6 galleys under the command of Amir Hussein. That's the 12 remaining ships from the original fleet he came up with. 4 carracks of Diu under Malik Aiz. 30 light galleys at Diu under Sidi Ali, who reports to Malik Aiz. And between 70 and 150 warboats from Calicut under Kunjari Malaka. That's a fairly capable force. You'll be sitting there going and saying, yes, it is. It is a fairly capable force. It's capable. But is it really capable? Because this is what the Portuguese are going to be turning up with. 5 large noose. That's what the Portuguese call their Atlantic carracks. So you have to consider the larger vessels, the vessels which will evolve into galleons, are the large noose. The Flor de Mar, which is the Viceroy's flagship, the Espirito Santo, the Belém, the Rey Grande, and the Tafara Grande. They're 5 large ones. There are 4 smaller ones. The Fore Perkia, Sant'Antonia, Re Pequeña, and Amadoria. And 4 square-rigged caravals, the Flor de Rosa, the Consagado, the Espera, and the Santa Maria do Arunda. There are 2 regular caravals, that's with Lantine sails. The Santiago, and we don't know the name of it, but we know its commander. It's called Alvaro Paratana. There are some galleys, the São Miguel and the São Cristóvão, under Paulo Rodrigues de Souza. And if you're looking at some of these names, go, hang on, there's a lot of the Souzas, there's a lot of this, there's a reason for it. Quite a lot of families get involved as these things normally come. It's not only the Viceroy who's brought out his children. And there's also Brigantine, the Santa Antonio, under Samuel Martins. Sure, wait, he was so broke he had to sell the guns to an enemy. No, to his ally. Basically, Amir Hussein has to either lease or sell his guns to Malik Aiz, who is an ally in theory. He's interesting. His first responsibility is to Diu, not in his mind to anyone else, and that's what he looks after. I was asking, what's this warboat? A rowboat, something big, rigged on, or something bigger? There is a whole debate about that, but they certainly seem to be oared. But unlike galleys, I don't think they have ram bows. So they're not galleys, but they are oared. Finnish Guy Street. Pronouncing all these folks is probably the hardest thing to do. There is a reason I'm skipping the captain's names on a lot of them. Oh, thank you for mentioning that, though. Anyway, so theoretically, that is 196 ships versus what? 20? $18? Yeah, 18 ships. 196 ships versus 18 ships. Cody 85 just puts coastal force versus an oceanic force. Certainly this is a coastal force. But you would expect they're going to be fighting in the littoral, so you'd expect them to have an advantage. There is a difference in that. How do I put it? The galleys are Venetian war galley style ships. And there is a reason why I have the Battle of Lepanto here. Because this is one of the problems for the Venetians, is that they actually put their design ideas and give their design ideas and some of their technology and some of their ideas for how to mount guns, etc., on galleys to the Sultan of Egypt. And of course, the Sultan of Egypt ends up failing and collapsing and being falling into the hands of the Ottoman Empire. So, you know, that's a problem. We'll leave for another day, but they do it for this war. The Portuguese, on the other hand, this is what their carracks look like. And this is actually quite a cool story behind this carrack. It is based actually on the design of the Flor de la Mar. And it can currently become found in Malacca, in Malaysia, and it's Flora de Mar was one of the longest lasting ships on the Indian run. She was not really very good as a cargo ship, but she served as a flagship and warship for many, many years. The average Indian now would hover around 400 to 450 tons, which this vessel sort of is. And it was consistently on the trips out to India and back. And it did very, very well. But this is actually, you can go and see this. You can go to the Maritime Museum of Malacca and you can see this. You can walk around it. They have actually built it. Okay? I'm not sure if you can find one in Portugal equivalent to it. I haven't really managed to do the necessary research to be 100% certain on that one, whether you can or can't. But the Portuguese, you can find this replica of the Florida Mar in Malaysia. If you want to go see it, you can go see it. Nice turn. So this is the battle of 110, 190 ships versus, well, it's up to 196 ships versus 18 ships. The Portuguese are outnumbered 6 to 10 to 1. On that loss of my was, it's an interesting result. And it all depends on the quality of those warboats. But judging by the outcome, those boats didn't do much despite numbers. We'll get into that. Vintage History. Does this engagement compare well to Yi Sun Shin's victory at Mayang? Yes. Now, the galleys and the galleys involved are what you'd expect and are fairly good. This is remember, the peak of what we call the medieval galley period, where they reach the apogee of their capabilities and their firepower, is 1571. This is 1509. It is 62 years before the Battle of Lepanto. They are going up. They are still getting better. They are capable, though. So it is not a decided world yet. I think the Santa Sima Trinidad picture. Well, this is the Santa Maria, which is I think it's a replica of the Santa Sima Trinidad. I think that's what she is, and she's still sailing around somewhere. But I'm not sure where she exactly is. But this is the cap. This is in Portugal. This is in Malaysia. So it's quite cool to go through. And the thing is, this is a full-sized that is a full-sized replica, whereas I'm not sure whether Santa Maria is. I'm not sure. It's worthwhile looking into it and finding out. Anyway, so we've given you a bit of background. His son's been killed. He's upset. To give you one quote. Okay. The matter is retires to his quarters for 3 days on hearing his son has been killed and is unwilling to see anyone. He decides that the presence of a Mamluk fleet in India is a grave threat to the Portuguese, and he decides that he's going to enact personal revenge for the death of his son at the hands of the Maritime. The quote that's sometimes put around is weird, and I'm sure means something different in Portuguese than it does in English. Because in English it translates as, "He who ate the chick must also eat the rooster or pay for it." I have found that quote now in several different places, and originally when I read it on the Wikipedia page, I thought someone is having a laugh. And then I found it in a couple of books, and I was going, well, variations of it in a couple of books. I'm sort of going, I'm sure this means something different in Portuguese than it does in English. And I did message a very good friend of mine who is Portuguese and asked her for her opinion, and she unfortunately hasn't gone back to me. Possibly because she's still laughing, or possibly because what I've said said a absolutely diabolical curse to her. I don't know, and so she's never going to talk to me. And I have no idea which it is. I also sent a message to another friend after that because she hadn't responded to another person I know, but he's currently. The thing is, he's in Poland at the moment with visiting family over there, so I wasn't bothering him. I was just going to go with a friend who's actually in Portugal, who's Portuguese, but and he hasn't managed to get back to me either. So perhaps it is an absolute atrocious curse in Portuguese. I don't know. All I know is it translates weird in English. Unfortunately, the monsoon's approaching, and you can't do much in the monsoon until September. So he uses the time to dry dock ships and assemble his force in Cochin. On the 6th of December, 1508, Alfonso de Albuquerque arrives in Cananor from the Persian Gulf with orders from King Manuel to replace Almeida as governor. Don Francisco actually has a personal vendetta against Albuquerque, as the latter had been assigned to the Arabian coast specifically to prevent Muslim navigation, or rather, from basically the forces of the Mamluk from entering or leaving the Red Sea, yet had failed. And his intentions, considering his intentions of personally destroying the Muslim fleet, or the Mamluk fleet, in retaliation of his son's death, because of this, he refused to allow his appointed successor to take office. He was therefore officially in rebellion against royal authority. And would rule India for another year in this sort of state of open rebellion. However, there is something interesting about this, because whilst he seems to be upset and with Albuquerque over it, Albuquerque does appear to not really press the issue, and does actually seem to sort of, how do I put this politely, assist with arrangements. Sorry, I've just dropped something on the floor. I'll find it in a bit. And in fact, almost takes a very willing part, because almost seems to feel a bit guilty for it. So, it's only on the 9th of December that the Portuguese fleet depart for Diu. From Cochin, the fleet moves to Calicut, hoping to intercept Zamarin's fleet before it left for Diu, but it had already gone. where they knew that frankly the fleets were heading up to Diu. That's where everything else was formed up. They presumed that's where the Mamluk fleet was, and that's where the submarine was going to as well. The Armada anchored in Battaglia on its way and managed to quell a dispute between its king and what is lovely phrase as the local Hindu privateer, not pirate, privateer. There's a difference. Who was allied to the Portuguese, Timojin. In Hanover, the Portuguese met with Timojin himself, who informed the viceroy of the enemy movements. And remember, this is the gentleman who has possibly 14 ships of his own and 2,000 mercenaries under his command. Yeah, useful guy to know. From Angevida, the Portuguese sailed to Naval, where they found a fortified city, which belonged to the Sultanate of Bijapur. Unfortunately, the captain of the Salmagal, Pioneer Souza, decides to investigate the harbour, and when he goes ashore, is ambushed by a force of... Well, there's a dispute of this, but some people claim he's ambushed by a force of 6,000 troops. Don't take this the wrong way, but if I'm ambushed by a force of 6,000 troops, that's not an ambush. That's me being blind, deaf, and dumb when I'm walking into a line. You can be ambushed by a dozen. But if you're one person walking up a street, 6,000 people can't get at you at the same time. There is no point in having 6,000 troops to ambush you. I'm guessing that's the entire garrison of the city. Anyway. He is killed along with some other Portuguese. 2 days later, the viceroy, who is already annoyed about his son, remember, and now they've just killed one of his friends, decides to come ashore with his various armoured forces, crushes the garrison that's stationed by the riverbank in an amphibious pincer attack, and then razes the city, which means basically burns it down, and the surrounding riverside settlements are devastated by cannon fire. Almost all their inhabitants are killed, along with the cattle and even apparently stray dogs. If you're getting the opinion that the Armada is slightly upset at this point, you might be right. According to a quote from Fernando Lopez de Castella, the Massacre de Bull gave rise to a curse on the western coast of India, where one might say, may the wrath of the Franks befall you. I have no idea and doubt that's true. Because I would presume it would be made a wrath of the Portuguese before you, not the Franks, unless they further got the Franks from the Franciscan friars. Maybe some of them were killed as well, and that's what it was their wrath, which is picked up. I don't know, but I don't think Franks is right. From the Bull, the Portuguese called it Chaul, where the previous people had been killed. I'm sure when they came to Chaul, I'm fairly sure the governor of Chaul was going, oh, we're going to be killed. There is no chance here. Surrender, everyone, now. We've just seen what they've done up the coast. But they don't. George Newman, he who kills the son must kill the father or be killed. I'm guessing so. As the proper English translation of that chicken rooster. I was asking, I'm currently going through Spanish Galleons by Angus Constant. Not a big book, but well, presume that Portuguese ships were not different, so that gives an idea about ship capabilities. It does. And the Portuguese ships usually were slightly bigger than their Spanish counterparts. Slightly. Because remember, the Spanish did think about the Mediterranean as well as the Atlantic, whereas the Portuguese just thought about the Atlantic. Greg Salsi, probably they just used Franks as Europeans. But they hadn't met the Franks. This is the thing. I understand the Franks are Europeans, but the Franks haven't got anywhere near India. Don't take this the wrong way, but they haven't. They're back in Europe. Dashitu Vachel. Tam has the word farang that is thought to derive from Frank, so it does seem possible. Word made it so as well now. I don't. It seems wrong to me. Anyway. As said, they called it Chaul. And then Don Francisco ordered the governor in town to prepare a tribute to be collected on their return from Diu. He did not object. The governor prepared the tribute. Possibly he was thinking I might not have to pay if they don't come back from Diu, but he's also must be thinking it's, problematic. At Bombay, Don Francisco receives a letter from Malik Ayers. He not only includes a letter from him, but also has a letter from the Portuguese prisoners, saying they are well treated. He wrote a rights to appease the viceroy. He states that he had the prisoners and that they were being well treated, and how bravely his son has fought. He's basically, Malikis sends a letter to the viceroy saying, "Your son fought very bravely. It was an honor to fight him. He was a worthy opponent, and I hope I'm a worthy opponent," sort of thing. And as said, it's kind of strange because Malik Ayers is the one who kills his son. If anyone does kill his son, it's Malik Ayers, because it's his ships coming in, which causes Almeida to go, I have to get out of here, because there are actually decent ships coming my way. And it's him who's been taking care of the prisoners. The viceroy writes back to Ayers with an interesting letter as well. I have to admit, I'm using the quote that I've seen translated the most, which is this always makes me feel bad because it's the quote which is also on Wikipedia, but that has come from good sources, and it's the quote which is best of the translation version I've seen. So, hey ho. I, the Viceroy, say to you, honoured Melikirs, Captain of Diu, that I go with my knights to the city of yours to take the people who are welcome there, who in Chaul fought my people and killed the man who was called my son. And I come with hope in God of heaven to take revenge on them and on those who assist them. And if I don't find them, I will take your city to pay for everything, and you for the help you have done at Chaul. This I tell you, so that you're well aware that I go, as I am now on this island of Bombay, as he will, so that he will tell you, the one who carries this letter. This is a man on a personal hunt for revenge. Okay, he's taking it personal, as Albertaskis just put. Some people get ambushed by cake. You cannot get ambushed by cake. Albuquerque knows where not to poke the angry dog. Yeah, I think Albuquerque just looked at Almeida and went, you know what? You're pissed off. I'm going to sit quietly here and help out. Oh. Maybe Kafir? Infidel? No, I'm not sure. I think the use of francs for European comes from the Holy Wars. Potentially, but Arab traders to India, potentially. I've said the sources they're using are reliable. I'm not claiming Wikipedia is reliable, but they have a site to a wonderful source which is on the Wayback, which I could find on the Wayback Machine, And that was very, very good for reading through the things. Because again, quite a lot of the things are in Portuguese and are, some of them are well written, some of them are not. It's a good quote. And you have to remember, Don Francisco is a member of the Order of Christ, which is, how do I put it? Is sort of the Knights Templars under a new name, because sort of what happened in Portugal was that Knights Templar were reconstituted as the Royal Military Order of our Lord Jesus Christ, rather than being completely abolished. They were modified, modernized, and changed. They'd read the tea leaves. But, yeah, okay, so 10 months have passed, and they're coming up to Diu to take revenge. Hussein had managed to take the chance to careen his ships and recovered a Clarke as well, which had been damaged, and got a reinforcement of 300 men. Whoop! However, Hussein and his relationship was terrible. Hussein was apparently aware of the letters Aziz was sending to the Viceroy, and he was also trying to demand the custody of the prisoners, because Hussein wanted to send them back to Cairo stuffed as a proof of his victory. Aziz refused. Aziz was keeping them well fed. He was keeping them well clothed. He was taking care of them. They realized very quickly they were under arrest by Aziz's forces, only so much as to protect them from Hussein's troops, and Hussein than they were to stop them fleeing anywhere. Hussein has to, well, the words are, and this is what I will quote, okay, in one book they say sell to Aziz. In another book they put lease to Aziz. In Wikipedia, I think they probably get it more accurately when they use the phrase pawn to Aziz. I know, I have been, and the reason I am mentioning Wiki as much as I am today is because, well, sometimes when I'm using a lot of translations and a lot of translation of books, Wiki, that's one area where Wiki does help. It gives you an idea of where the translations should go, in theory. If you apply common sense to it and don't trust it, go and check out the sources. But, yeah, that's fun. Hussein hasn't withdrawn to Egypt, mostly because he's scared. If he goes back to Egypt now, he's probably going to get killed by the Sultan, because he hasn't won enough victory and he's lost a lot of ships. And in contrast, Maliki is theoretically assisting Amir Hussein, but to do so, he's risking his city and his own life. Turning on Hussein, though, well, the Sultan, who he serves, might take Aziz's head. They're pretty much, they have no option. They can't flee. Neither of them can flee. Neither of them can do anything other than prepare for the Portuguese coming and realize there is a coming storm. Dick Richards, a vengeful man with a power is a dangerous force to reckon with, especially when you kill his favorite son. Yeah. Ghost says, hello, my name is Don Francisco de Almeida. You killed my son, prepare to die. That's pretty much what's going on. I shouldn't be laughing at this, but this is serious. This could be a movie. This could be a big Hollywood blockbuster. You could imagine, you could get, if you think of those big stars who are in their 60s now, you could have the young, dashing warrior son struck down, fighting bravely, and then, you know, the older father is going, I will get revenge. I can imagine Patrick Stewart. I know he's a little bit older than Almeida, but I can imagine Patrick Stewart playing this, going, I am coming for you. Or it could be the guy who plays, could be Will. The guy who plays Will, that would be cool. He could do it. He's got the beard. He's got the right beard to pull off being, the Almeida. They could do it well. I say the religion has been used to justify too many disasters in the past. Yeah, I keep trying to point out this is a battle for control of money, and this particular battle, the whole wider conflict, and this battle itself is one for familial revenge. It is nothing to do religion. Religion is just roughly being used as the denominators of the sides, but it isn't really, because as I keep trying to call them the alliance and making sure I call them the alliance, but a lot of the books and notes say, call them other things. And the Portuguese have, of course, the Hindus on side, and it's just, yeah. It is revenge. Finnish history. Being married to a linguist that speaks 14 languages helps me a lot in my research. I'm jealous, VCH. I really am. Jonathan Frakes. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Oh. Very bizarre. I guess it was viewed as a point of honor to avenge his son's death by his peers. Yes, to an extent, but also it's understandable. And his son had died honorably fighting, and that was most of the crews. Remember, most of Almeida, the junior's ships had got away thanks to him sacrificing his life to protect them. They felt they had to repay the debt. So you had the fact that the ships were loyal to, were all quite loyal to the father because of what he'd been leading them and the successes he'd given them and the things he'd given them. And then you have his son, the group came back, that he actually, the son came back and reported, well, your son was killed saving our lives. So they're already very loyal and very motivated for revenge. And he's after revenge. And then the only one who could have possibly stopped him would be Albuquerque. And when he shows up, he listens to the story and goes, you're in charge, mate. You can stay in charge. By the way, here are my ships. Let's go help you. Here are my ships. Here are my men. And yeah. Anyway. So this is what's happening. They're heading up to Diu. Now, on the 2nd of February 1509, the Portuguese sight Diu from the top of their crow's nests. So they get their first view of what they're looking at. As they approach, Malik Ali's withdraws from the city. He leaves overall command to Hussein and he withdraws from the city. He takes the prisoners, he takes his troops, and a lot of his troops, and he withdraws. He basically decides he's not getting in this fight. It's a gamble, but yeah. Now you're probably looking at this and going, what is going on here? Well, the red are the Portuguese. All the other ships are not the Portuguese. Hussein tries to order his warships to sally out and harass the Portuguese fleet before they have time to recover from the journey. But yeah, because they limit themselves to within the range of the cannon of the fortress, They don't go that far and don't really cause that much trouble. And the Viceroy spends the night with many of his captains deciding on the course of action. When day breaks, the Portuguese see that the Alliance fleet has taken advantage of the protection offered by the harbour of Diu and the Channel and the fort specifically, to latch their carracks and galleys together close to the shore and await the Portuguese attack. So they've latched them together. This is like the Battle of Slees all over again, which we've been over before, and I've talked about before. Battle of Slees, where the English wipe out the French fleet because they chain themselves all together, prepare to fight a defensive battle, and then the English just roll up and go, well, we'll attack from one side and work our way through the fleet. It's like the Battle of Nile. Again, there is a motif here going, this sounds like a great idea. Let's all latch together. But if you don't do it exactly perfectly, you're in trouble. And what he also does is he puts all the warboats, you can see on the map here, they're all up here, up the channel, ready to come racing down. The idea is that the Portuguese will come and present and try and attack all the ships one at a time, because that's what the Portuguese are going to do. You know, they're going to attack everyone one at a time, equal numbers, and then while they're doing that, they won't do anything about these warboats coming up behind them. Sure, Mike, did the Portuguese have a similar prize scheme to the British? Not quite the same, but they did have something going on. Dick Richards. Those names are also their version of our celebrities on top of it. The men would be annoyed. Yep. So, the Portuguese divide their forces into roughly 4 groups. One group is to go and board the Mamluk carracks after the preliminary bombardment. Another is to attack the stationary Mamluk carracks galleys from the flank. So they're basically going to attack each flank and work their way to the middle. And there was a bombardment group that would support the rest of the fleet by standing off and blasting away continually. And the flagship itself would not participate in the boarding, but would position itself in a convenient position to direct the battle and support it with firepower. This only happens because Almeida, the captains, refuse. They say, Viceroy, if you risk your life in this battle and try and lead the boarding, we will refuse to go into action because you are too important to us. Let us avenge your son for you. You must survive. You must live. To see the victory, to see the vengeance done, sort of thing. Which is quite an honourable thing to do, quite an interesting thing to do. But it's they're basically worried about it. And so that's what happens. And also there's actually even a sort of 5th group, because there's the Brigantine Santa Antonio, which is going around ensuring communication, standing off rather like frigates in the Age of Sail in the big fleet battles would do, making sure the communications are going backwards and forwards. So the Portuguese fleet is going to be coordinated. Whatever happens, the Portuguese fleet is going to be coordinated. And the Santa Antonio, before the battle, goes through the fleet delivering the Viceroy's speech. In this speech, he detailed the reasons to which they'd sought out the enemy. But also, he details the rewards that be granted in the case of victory. The soldiery would have the right to the sack of the city, which is important. Knighthood to all soldiers. So all soldiers would become knights. Nobility to the knights. Criminals would be banished from the realm, would be pardoned. So you'd receive pardon from your crimes and would be able to return to Portugal, pardoned. This has to be honoured by the king. This is done in the king's name, even though he's technically in rebellion against the king, because he's supposed to have handed over to Albuquerque, but Albuquerque hasn't pushed the issue. And slaves would receive the condition of squires if they were freed within a year. So they would be given the status of squire if they were freed within a year at that time. That's fairly good. And by slaves at this point, actually, you have to remember that there were quite a lot of slaves who were Portuguese. Let's be honest, they're Portuguese. Okay, it's basically it's a version of slavery like serfdom. Anyway, so the battle starts. The wind had moved at roughly 11 a.m., which supported the attack group. And the Fleur de Mar, the flagship, hoists its royal banner, and a single shot is fired, signaling the start of the battle. Traditional start of the battle. Boom! Single cannon shot rolls out. Everyone goes in a position. The Portuguese cry Santiago and begin their approach. They're headed by the galley São Miguel at the head of the formation, which is probing the channel ahead. And its job is to sweep out the way anything which gets in the way. There is a general bombardment between the two forces, and then they sort of start to grapple. But you have to remember there is part of the squadron, of the Portuguese squadron, is standing back and continuing to bombard. And the Portuguese actually employ a very cool gunnery tactic, which they picked up on. Which, because the water was quite so flat and calm in the harbour of Diu, they fired the cannonballs directly at the water, and the cannonballs bounced like skipping stones and hit the enemy ships at the waterline. Santa Espirito, which is the Vice Admiral's flagship, hits one of the enemy ships at the waterline and sinks it instantly. This is a major loss because one of the big ships is lost pretty much straight away for the Allies. But also, you have to realize that there is another problem. Most of the Allied fleet is armed galleys, and therefore they have guns fore and aft. They don't have a broadside. So they can't really get into a battle of artillery battle with the carracks and caravels, which do have a broadside, especially as the Portuguese nows are bigger and powerful. They're indentured servitude, pretty much. Anyway. As the carracks made contact, Hussein's flagship is grappled by the Santa Espirito. And this is a point here. It's basically, if I was going to put it in different ways, it's this. If you've got a battle of Trafalgar, and Nelson has ordered to stand off, as said, he had been ordered by his captains to basically stand off. And Collingwood has let him say, you've got to stay back and protect yourself, Nelson. You have to be in charge, I will lead the fight. It's like Collingwood heading straight for Villeneuve and basically charging headfirst onto the ship. I mean, the Vice Admiral is at the front leading, charging onto Hussein's flagship. So one of the count has him yelling out Hussein's name as he's charging onto the ship, telling him he's coming for him. Now, I have to say that's a particularly florid account, so I'm not quite sure about that one. It seems a little bit out of character. But it's also quite possible, because this is the thing. That Vice Admiral is there instead of his agreement with his fellow Order of the Knights, his commander, is that if his commander stays back, he will ensure vengeance is done. So his command... And therefore, vengeance is personal for him at this point. And he's a very skilled professional officer himself. Now, he is, of course, Nuno Vaz Pereira, who we don't know much about, other than knowing he was a very experienced and very capable officer from the books I've read about him. Well, read about this sort of action discussion. So yeah, this will be another good part for an actor of later middling years. And Ruapera jumps onto the enemy bow castle, as what is undescribed, and before even the ships were secured, and manages to lead the storming all the way to the midships. Another Mamluk ship sees its flagship in trouble and goes to the unengaged side of the Santo Espirito, and tries to board from that side. So you've got the flagship and you've got the Santo Espiritos come up here along this side, and another Mamluk ship comes in from this side to board in. And seeing he's in trouble, and at this point, this is why Sean Bean would actually be good for Ruapera, because he's killed at this crucial moment. He's leading the fight, and he's killed. But at this point, as he's about to die, as he's dying, the Rey Grande, under Francisco de Tavora, the rear admiral, who's also one, slams into the other side of Hussein's flagship, and he jumps on, shouting for vengeance. And he doesn't just take the flagship of Hussein, he charges across Hussein's flagship, then he charges across the Santo Espirito, and he comes off the other side onto a second Mamluk ship, and takes that as well. It's basically a case of, you have taken out the Vice Admiral, oh good lord, here comes the Rear Admiral. It's just charge. All the time you have, again, this is like the Battle of Trafalgar again, you have the Ethiopian and Turkish, Ottoman in origin, bowmen, which have been hired, are up in the crow's nest of the Mamluk ships, trying to fire down at the Portuguese matchlock crews. And what the Portuguese end up doing is using their clay grenades and chucking them into the crow's nest and blowing them up. And that's how they get rid of them. That's kind of like how we deal with sniper nests to this day. Unsurprisingly, when Hussein's flagship manages to go down, managed to get taken, this tips the battle in the Portuguese favour. Interesting enough, Hussein survives. He does get off the ship. He manages to flee away, but despite having two admirals attempt vengeance on him, or at least, well, Commodore equivalents, as they were captains of their own ships as well at the time, but Hussein, of course, had expected the Portuguese, as I said, to come straight in, commit all their ships to the grapple, and as such, he positioned the warboats up there in La Masse. However, their position there noticed, and João de Nova, the captain of the Fior de Mar, points out to his admiral, this is Almeida, and goes, "Sir, it would not be disrespecting your captains if we positioned ourselves in such a way as to block those vessels from interfering, would it?" Which Almeida goes, "Let's do it." And so it's, now I think it probably is the 150 ships, but some people say it must be 70, because what happens is the Fleur de Mer parks itself opposite them as they're coming down and starts firing and wipes them out entirely. Now, they're not the biggest thing. They're oared and the sort of things. They're basically inshore boats. And as they start to go down, they do block the way of others. And this is why I sort of lean towards the larger number, because I think they probably took them out quite quickly, and they blocked each other up, and then they just basically, it was a turkey shoot. It was just, they couldn't get out the way. They were blocked in, they couldn't maneuver, and they just firing down at them, and they can't get out of the way. It's the fox and the hen house. Either way, That's what Almeida is getting up to at this point. He's covering, of course, his own forces, preventing them being surrounded, and keeping not actually grappling with any ship as he promised his captains he would do. He's promising his captains he wouldn't grapple. He's not grappling. He's keeping his honor and his promise, but he is jumping from gun to gun, making sure they're firing. Yeah. We do know Flor de Mar fires somewhere in the region of 600 shots. And some of those shots took out multiple boats. So, yeah, that's another reason why I think 150 is possibly more likely. And, of course, the faster group of galleys and caravels decided to grapple the flank of the stationary enemy galleys. And whilst the initial Portuguese assault is repelled, when the supporting fire support of ships decide to turn their fire on the galleys, they set the galleys adrift, break up their lines, and then they manage to go in and plunder. By the end of the day, the carracks have taken. The Portuguese have secured most of the carracks, and they're all slowly taken out. There is one ship, a great carrack, that's larger than any other vessels in the Alliance fleet, and it had been anchored too close to the shore for most of the deep draft Portuguese vessels to reach, which again shows you these are Mediterranean-style carracks and not Atlantic-style carracks, which is why it's interesting. You should call them Navals, etc. And they basically just stand off and blast away at it for most of the day, and it's until it sinks. Oh. Aldaski, you should know our observers watching and taking lots of notes. This is let's be honest. The Portuguese and the Portuguese English have been allied for a very, very long time for a reason. We have a similar approach. Didn't they use staff slings for grenades? Yes. It was some were chucks, some were on the staff, and yeah. There's also another account which we won't go into. Apparently, there's one where they decided to go up the crow's nest, and as they swung across on a rope, they chucked it. But again, that's an account which there's a particularly florid account which I am not quite sure the quality translation on, which is why I haven't used any quotes of, and why I haven't mentioned it in the actual long patrol version of it. But I can mention live because I can. Nice way in the live, I can get away with going things of this is a slightly less reliable account, but it's quite cool, so I can talk about it. Anyway, that's the Battle of Diu. Aftermath. Well, how do I put this politely? So, the battle ended in victory for the Portuguese. Surprise, surprise. The Alliance coalition was defeated. This is a battle of annihilation. Like Trafalgar, like others. And this is a battle for control of the Indian Ocean trade routes, but it's also, as I said, a personal battle for revenge over the death of a son. After the battle, Malik A's returns the prisoners taken at Chaul. They are returned well-dressed, fed, and unharmed. Don Francisco, in return, refuses to take over Diu, claiming that it would be expensive to maintain, and signed a fair trade agreement with Aziz, hoping and opened a factory in the city, which Aziz promised to protect. And here's the thing. As part of the agreement, Aziz supplied a contingent of soldiers who were based at the factory to protect it with his own personal soldiers from his own personal force. He did no charge to the Portuguese. They were protected by his own men. Now, if you're all sitting there going, Alex, I think this was agreed before the battle so that Almeida could get victory, because that's the only reason not to invade the city at this point, you might be right. And it would sound certainly like it, especially as if I'm fairly sure if Ease had actually been involved in the battle there, at no point would those ships have been chained together so they couldn't fire at the enemy. Spoils from the battle included 3 galleys, 3 carracks, 600 bronze artillery pieces, and 3 royal flags of the Mamluk Sultan of Cairo that was sent to Portugal to be displayed in the Convento de Cristo. That is the headquarters of the Order of Christ, which is the Order of Knights, which were honestly not the Knights Templars, which Almeida was part of. And whilst the Viceroy extracted from the merchants of Diu, who funded the refitting merchant fleet, a payment of 300,000 gold exfens, of which 100,000 were distributed amongst the troops, and 10,000 was donated to a hospital of Cochin to look after the personnel. So he's put 100,000 pieces of gold he's distributed amongst his sailors. What is interesting is that whilst they build the factory, etc., they don't seek a construction of fortress. The interesting thing is Mamluk offers them a fortress. They turn it down officially, and they don't get it. And actually, they don't get it till 13 years after Malik Aiz dies. He dies in 1522. They don't get a factory, and that's what this is. This is the fortress they build there. The fortress of Diu isn't built until 1535. And that is thanks to the Treaty of Bassine, which is made in 1534. And after the Portuguese have done several attempts to seize the island by force. So, they could have seized it by force in 1509. They would have been able to do it. Theoretically. But they don't. Because of Aiz. He is smart. As VCH has just said, Aiz seems to have been a fairly honourable man. Yes, he was. A fairly smart one as well. Vintage Card said, if the Alliance had a large supply of iron brew, they could have preserved. No. Iron brew wouldn't do that. And besides, if they had a large supply of iron brew, there would have been my forebears fighting to take the iron brew back. John Romero, why do I feel like the Portuguese leader kept going for the person who killed his son? Here is the other result, though. So Aiz has been very good to the prisoners. And as a result, the Viceroy, any prisoners which could claim to be Aziz's troops but couldn't get away, etc., or belonged to Diu, were treated quite well. They were returned. The treatment of the Mamluk captives, however, was, let's put it this way, brutal. Almeida orders most of them to be hanged, burnt alive, or torn to pieces by being tied to the mouths of cannon, which are then fired. In retaliation for his son's death. As after the battle, Almeida actually reports to King Manuel, as long as you may be powerful at sea, you will hold India as yours. And if you do not possess this power, little will avail you of a fortress on a shore, which perhaps explains why he didn't want the fortress of Diu. He didn't want to be tied to protect it. Now, in perhaps the reason why Sean Bean might want to be cast as Almeida. Well, after handing the viceroy's post to Alfonso de Albuquerque and leaving for Portugal in November 1509, after this battle, Almeida has actually killed himself in December in a skirmish against the Khoikhoi tribe of the Cape of Good Hope, along with 70 other Portuguese sailors, because here is the fact. That's more than were lost in the Battle of Diu. The Battle of Diu, the casualties for the Portuguese were 32 dead and 300 wounded. The casualties for the enemy side, the alliance, was all Mamluks were killed barring 22. So they started off with some region of 450 Mamluks. Only 22 survived. All Mamluk ships are captured. 4 Gujarati carracks were captured. 1,300 Gujarati personnel are dead. Between 4,000 and 5,000 Gujaratis started the battle. As many as 30% are dead. The fact is, Almeida had a huge advantage. He had very experienced crews. He had very well trained crews. And that is, how he managed to get off the number of shots he does. Bruno Waters, how long would it take the one ship to get off 600 shots? Wasn't the firing rate horribly slow? It was, but they got it. It wouldn't have been every half an hour. They would have been a lot quicker than that. They were not mounted. Don't think Armada style. Think ship style. Hello, Armo BT. Yeah, it was a pretty much one-sided battle. So I've done Almeida, what happens to him? I've done Ais, what happens to him? He dies in his bed in 1522, happily. Rich, powerful, respected as one of the greatest warriors of his age, and one of the greatest diplomats of his age. Honestly, as opposed to. Hussein, well, as said, he survived the battle. He fled on horseback, returned to Cairo, and several years later was actually put in charge of another fleet. He's sent with 3,000 men to fight the Portuguese. And he is murdered by Salman Reis, his second in command. Basically, this is the large fleet that the Mamluk Sultan of Egypt has put together. It is their last gasp for control in Portuguese in the Indian Ocean, which is their last attempt to try and have money and stability. The Ottomans managed to arrange for his second in command to murder him and bring the fleet over to the Ottomans, or rather, what remains after they've killed off everyone that would fight them. Literally murders him. It's not an engagement or a fight. No. It's the second in command. It's like Collingwood walking onto Nelson's flagship, going, "Hello, my friend. How are you?" Stab. That's how it's done. With the loss of their fleet, this accelerates the infighting. And the Ottomans invade the Sultan of Egypt, and Mamluk Sultan of Egypt collapses, and basically it's done under Ottoman rule at that point. So, the only one who does well, Malik Ais. And that would actually be that would be a good thing in a movie, because let's be honest, in a movie you'd think after the big battle, yes, he's going home, he's going to be safe. And he gets to Africa, he stopped for water. They're they were a group who had a long history with. You know, they knew them, they respected, they thought they had a trading relationship with them, and something goes wrong. It's very muddled as to why there is even a fight. It certainly doesn't seem to be expected by the Portuguese. And as I said, he gets killed. So what's the legacy of this battle? Well, the legacy of this battle is simple. Firepower wins. It's brutal, it's effective, but firepower wins. This is what founds the very rich, very important Portuguese Empire, this battle, because it sets up for what Albuquerque does next. And Alfonso Albuquerque will go on to, well, how do I put this? He conquers Goa, conquers Malacca, sends embassies to Pegu, Sumatra, and Siam, does expeditions to the Spice Islands, manages to finish the War of Calicut by finally conquering them, conducts campaigns in the Red Sea, conquers Ormuz, and that's what he achieves in 6 years. All thanks to the fact that after this point, there is no Mamluk fleet anymore. The Mamluk, by the time the Mamluks put together another fleet, they are far too down the curve, and they have managed to take over all the critical trading points. And this is thanks to the Battle of Almeida wins. Georgine, who said anything that's basically in the nicest way when it comes to stabbing someone, as someone else would tell you, it's far easier to find a heart from the front. Of course, Albuquerque would die in post, but yeah. Basically, the Portuguese have produced some very good admirals, and they have a habit of dying after achieving quite a lot of things, which is quite useful for the king of Portugal, because it means when they come back, they don't cause any trouble. But ultimately, the legacy is this. The Portuguese have established a pattern. They have got, if we go back to the beginning, they have got control of part of the world. This part of the world is theirs, according to the Pope, according to the Treaty of Tordesillas. and they are now establishing control over it. And again, this is far richer than this is. In this one, if you want to extract stuff, you have to send people to do the extraction. In this one, you just have to set up a trade factory, which requires far less people. They'll do. It's self-extracting. It's brilliant. And this is what the Portuguese are establishing. They are establishing control. If you look at those flags, all positioned around the coast, so they're sort of shields and flags, that tells you where the Portuguese are on that map. And they're establishing control at key points. Again, if we go back to to an earlier map, we look at that map. And actually, what I will do is I will change that, and find the other map. This dot. Can I find it? Oh, this is annoying me. Nope. It's always annoying when you can't find the map you want. I'm just going to nick it again. And if you notice, those positions of those flags line up nicely with the points and the key entrepôts of this route. So they're not just they're taking control of all the ports along the way of the route. So they're not just taking control of a portion of the route, they're taking control of the whole route. So they can direct all the traffic and all the trade. This is the key point they're after. They want it all. They won't just want to control a bit and tax a bit. They want to control it all. This is another different approach to warfare, because it's kind of like the Ottoman Empire deciding that they wanted to control all of China as well, and all of India, which they probably would have done if they would have wanted to, if they'd thought they had the chance. But they couldn't do that. But the Portuguese, this little part of the Iberian Peninsula, this mountain-locked space, can, because they have the ships, because they have the technology, because they have to build ships that can take on the Atlantic. And building a ship that can take on the Atlantic gives you an advantage for ships which can take on anything else in the world, because if you can survive the North and South Atlantic, you can survive quite a large portion of the world's oceans. John Morris, so you could say this is the Age of Sail version of Jutland. Nah, this is an early version of Trafalgar. It decides who's going to control the Indian Ocean. It decides who's going to be the big fleet. And until the Dutch start showing up in strength, and then eventually the British and the French start showing up in strength, it's the Portuguese. I was asking, did the Portuguese develop shipbuilding industry there, or they had to rely on ships built in central homeland? They mainly relied on one sent from the homeland. They did a lot of maintenance there. They didn't try and build ships out there. So anyway, what part of the ocean is worse than the North and South Atlantic? Antarctic Ocean, and occasionally the Arctic. Basically, to get worse than North and South Atlantic, you have to go very far north or south. Places where the wind just keeps going around and around the Earth with the waves. Well, I think let's see. As I understand it, yeah, basically the Portuguese kept control of Goa for as long as they could, and they really did keep a lot of control of it for a long time. And I think they only gave it up in 1961 when the Indian actually invaded the remaining Portuguese possessions of Goa and Damon, and the Portuguese forces actually put up a fight. They only had 3,300 soldiers, and the Indian force was 30,000 with full air support and naval support. And the governor of Portuguese India only signed the surrender on the 9th of December 1961, which ended 450 years of Portuguese rule in India. So, yeah, the Portuguese kept Goa for a long, long time once they were there. So that's Albuquerque. And he's building on that victory of Almeida. So there's legacy for you. Seneca, people are saying Spain got the better part of their deal because they kept their stuff longer. Let's see. Portugal only gave up Goa in 1961 after India invaded. Don't take this the wrong way, but I think they managed to keep their stuff a bit longer. I think the thing is, the Spanish stuff is more well known than the Portuguese. And also because the Portuguese allowed the English and the British to trade with their territories because they decided that, frankly, that would be better than trying to lose them to the British. You would either you were going to suffer British piracy and English piracy, or you could let them trade. And the Portuguese decided to let them trade and return. That meant that the British usually backed up the Portuguese, and especially in later years when the Royal Navy was far stronger than the Portuguese Navy in the Indian Ocean, the Royal Navy could be counted on to support the Portuguese interests because Portugal was the oldest ally. Why haven't the USA learnt the deck parking lessons at the RN time? That's carrier and to do with the North Atlantic. The US have learnt them. It's just the US. Well, they used to always operate with having far larger allowances in aircraft than the Royal Navy did, but now life is different, so they might be changing their tune soon. They do seem to be parking a lot more down in the hangar. This is Foxo. What made the Portuguese carracks different from Mamluk lands? They were bigger and built to stand the Atlantic Ocean, so they were built with well, let's put it this way. There's a reason why these are called Mediterranean carracks and the Portuguese ones are called naus. The difference is the strength and the construction of their build. If I take you to an earlier picture, a later picture, that is a nau. And as you can see, it's built quite big. It's got prominent castles, but it's quite a big, heavy constructed ship. And that was important for fighting these battles. Azuski, wasn't our mistake then, relying on home production? There are no easy ways to grow your fleet and cover any losses. Yes and no. there's a limitation to what you can do, and they'd only been out there 10 years at this point. But when they're out longer, and also you're setting up factories, not ports. If you have to remember they're not really setting up fortification. They set up a few forts. They set up factories in fortified, which are sometimes set up inside their forts, which are fortified places and protected. But they're not really setting up whole ports. They're moving into existing infrastructure. So yes, they can do maintenance, etc., but they haven't set up facilities until they've got Goa, and then Goa gets some facilities, limited ones, but some facilities, as I understand it. But that's not yet this period. That's everyone. 96 everyone. That, don't take this the wrong way, but we're in the age of sail today. My brain is not able to jump to carrier onboard delivery aircraft and remember the stats for the Avro 748 and whether or not it'll be too big for the elevator on the CVN 65 on limits. I doubt it would be, but I would have to actually do some research and get my brain out of the age of sail. I do love your questions, but sometimes I'm in the middle of age of sail and I'm suddenly got a question on something which is completely the other different period. And my poor brain's going, what? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. That is the Battle of Diu. It's one of those forgotten battles, and it's a really interesting story. Something. How would an Age of Sail dragon carrier look like? Oh, that would take a while. Dragon carrier. That'd be fun. Big, if you're going to have dragons taken off it. Favorite type of sail? Ooh, Oswilski. He's saying I like the fully rigged ships of the sort of Cuddy Sark era. I like all those sails and all that maximum sail power. But and in this area, there is an example. The Lantine sail can be quite useful for maneuverability. But probably for this era, the square rigged ships have the advantage. I chose this topic for today because, well, A, it was the anniversary, but B, it's also something people often don't talk about, this battle, and the Battle of Diu is interesting. Why were Egypt and Persia unable to react to trade? Did they try and assimilate into the Portuguese network? No, they tried to fight the Portuguese network, but the trouble is they didn't. The trouble is for Egypt is that they were taken over by the Ottomans, and for Persia, to an extent, they are always fighting the Ottomans. And if they're fighting continual land war, it's kind of like Germany. Germany can afford to build up a fleet as long as they don't have to fight a land war because they have a huge empire. Same with France. They can afford to build up a fleet as long as they don't have a land war. But the trouble is they can't afford to fill up a fleet at the expense of an army. For Portugal, a relatively small commitment, we're talking a few thousand men, and ships could achieve this because they didn't have territories to defend. Because their factories are all in allied territories, so it's not them who defend them, it's the army or the local. For example, if we talk about Ais, once a factory set up in Diu, who's responsible for protecting that factory? Is it the Portuguese? No, it's him, and he makes sure it's protected. And it's to an extent the similar scenario in Cochin and all these things. It hadn't worked out that way in Calicut because of the actions of Zamarin, but it had worked out for the others. So that's the real thing. The reason what comes later, of course, is the the British East Indian Company and the British and the Dutch East Indies Company. The British East Indian Company, they come in, and there's a reason why they're the East India Company. Because if you think about it, we've been talking about the Portuguese factories. They're all on the west coast of India. Where are the British going for? East of India. Because that's the side which, their allies are on the west coast of India. So as not to displease them, they set up the East India Company. It's founded in 1600 when the Portuguese are still quite strong and present there, and so this doesn't upset them. And that is what the British do. The British go into East India, and they set up factories. And the difference is the British find in East India that they are dealing with even more interesting rulers than the Portuguese have had to deal with. And so the East India Company starts to organize its own troops. And once it has its own troops, well, if they're not doing anything, they might as well be used to support local ruler. And local ruler goes, well, that's nice. I'm having trouble collecting taxes. Okay, we'll collect taxes for you. And eventually they end up running the place. But it's interesting times. Thank you, Yori Sage. Glad you got lost in it. Dr. Richard, what is the weight of shot in the guns of the Galicia's front battery? That is an entirely interesting thing because they are bronze cannon, and honestly, some of those ships have uniform guns. Some of them have pairs of guns, a pair of big guns, a pair of lighter guns, a pair of bigger guns, but not as big as the big guns. We're talking probably 12 to 18 pounds at the maximum. We're not talking the big weight of shots that you get later on. We're talking the frigate level weight of shots. Maybe often less than that. The Big Brzezinski. I guess I have Portugal to thank for being able to play Uncharted Waters, but on my SNS. Probably. That's one. Also, Portugal doesn't have to keep a large army funded to defend their homeland, and it's very easy to defend from Spain because the only way to get an army is in its mountain passes. Yeah, that is to an extent true. It's not so much easy to defend as you can defend it, and you have time to get your army together. Are there fluffy? Where are fluffy Carracks? Well, the fluffy research assistants aren't here because one of them's been to the vets today for his annual ear checkup, and the other one has been running around the garden like a mad fluff, having fun, and has worn himself out. So he's currently, I'm told, asleep on my mum's lap. Good luck, Seneca Nero. Right. Well, let's talk about what we've got coming up next. Right then, in the cruisers, because I can do this for the cruise long patrols at the moment, because I'm only in the first half. We've got the Brummer class coming next week of the Kaiserlich Marine. I've still got to record that. For some reason, I have skipped really far ahead and have recorded lots of them from March and various other things, but I haven't recorded the 8th of February. I have no idea why. Duke of Edinburgh class, halfway through recording that, probably going to re-record all because I'm not too sure about the beginning at the moment. Then we got the Forward class. Then in March we have the Norfolk class counties. That's been recorded and sitting up there for ages. Coinsburg class, that's recorded, but I'm going to check it for it. Glorious Heritage class, that has had 4 versions of it recorded, of which one was sent out to people to be checked and then came back with notes and has been re-recorded and is now placed up. And then we have the Pathfinder class, which has been written out but not yet recorded. York, Exeter, and Canaris class, all recorded. Is the Canaris class recorded? I think so. Leipzig class, written up, not recorded. Ducassine class, not yet recorded, but written up. My plan is to try and get as many written up and done as possible, so I can use the time I'm not using for that for writing and researching books, but also for making sure the lives are as well prepared as possible. That's it. I'll find some specs on that plane before Blue Ships on Sunday. Thank you. Duchess Vachel, the Spanish built first rates in Havana. Did any other power build such large ships anywhere but their home ports? The British built some ships in India. They used to like them because they were built of teak. I think the French also considered building some in other ports. I'm not sure how successful they were. The Portuguese built some ships did do some construction in Gar, but I've forgotten what level it got up to. And Colin Cameron, was it in the the Portuguese India ports that the German traders were trapped in during World War I? Yes. And there's actually a movie about some very interesting gentleman from one of the light horse regiments, one of the reserve regiments in India, who mounted a raid on a port which they thought there was a spy in or something. I forget that movie, but it was a good one. You have to remember that Diu is a very important place, especially as I'm not sure if I mentioned this enough during the discussion. Diu is Gujarati, and the Sultan of Gujarat nominated Malik Aziz, and Malik Aziz is a former bowman and slave, possibly of Georgian or Dalmatian origin, and is the governor of Diu at this point. He's managed to build himself up. And so that's where he came from. And this is one of the reasons why I'm quite so impressed with him, because he had actually been pursuing various policies to manage the Portuguese involvement. He's then forced to be fighting the Portuguese because of Hussein's arrival. But he'd actually built up quite good relations with the Portuguese. It's also interesting to point out that barring Malikis, who is to an extent forced to by the Sultan of Gujarat, thinking, well, it's my fellow Sultan of Cairo, who, and we're brothers, and all these things, and we protect the pilgrimages to Hajj and all those things. So we have to do this together. It's interesting that other than Malikis under those sort of orders and Zamarin, no other rulers of the subcontinent decided to fight the Portuguese. They really didn't like what the Egyptians were promising or what the Egyptians were offering. And they also didn't care, because remember, the Portuguese aren't cutting them out of the trade. This is the point. To many of the Indian rulers sitting there going, we don't care whose money we get at this point in the trade. You care because if the trade doesn't go through you, you don't get any money. But the trade's still going through us, so we're still getting the money. So we don't care about you. Which is the point. So Aiz is only ever really supporting Hussein because he doesn't want to annoy his own sultan, and because Hussein's already in his city and he's trying to protect his city, which possibly explains why Aziz has such good relations with the Portuguese and is able to do what he wants to do. That's for sure. Would you consider covering the journey home Ernan's landing party? I might. That's good. The northern central Spanish-Portuguese border will be very difficult to move an army through. South, but easier. Still not easier. Not mountains like Spain-France border, but still hard country. Second note, the first DM campaign in tabletop RPG will be about the Calcutta Lighthorse. Ah, yes. The British on the Great Lakes. A Maersk liner just got around the ground here in Germany. Ouch. That's not good. Right. What else have we got? Got Lord Charles Beresford's birthday next week. So that's going to be Thursday's fun. And I'm going to say now, Brew Ship 70 is probably going to be done from a hotel room. And it might have to be moved depending on the day, because on what happens on the day, because I am teaching. Or rather, I am course directing for the lovely Justin Craig. I think classes are still open. We have GCSE Maths, GCSE Physics, and I think GCSE English available, along with A-Level Maths, A-Level Biology, and A-Level English, I don't want to say. I'm not 100% sure. But at the moment, plus we have spaces open in all the classes there. I know that because I'm the course director, so I'm headmaster at a school in London for 4 days. So I am up in London, and on a couple of nights I'm staying up in a hotel because I have to, because of the hours I'm going to be keeping. And one of those is going to be the night of the 13th. So I'll be doing that from a hotel room via Wi-Fi. So we'll fingers crossed and it works. But if it does work, well, I will keep going as long as you lot want to chat, basically. There's a Fox note. How were the Dutch and English able to challenge the Portuguese in West India, given the Portuguese had the support of the Indians and their factories? Because the English worked with the Portuguese, and they worked with them to push out the Dutch. And by the time the English were there in a sufficient force, the Portuguese were having enough troubles at home that they frankly didn't want to fight with the English, because they needed the English to support them against the Spanish. Hackenbergville. Here's one for you. What do you call the pieces you find on the deck after a greyhound has taken the barrier? Oh, good lord, I don't want to answer that one. Can't see all of what you're showing. Well, that's because I've put it off to one side. So there you go. If I go back, that's all we've got coming up. I've worked out some of the ones up until April. I've got the first 2 of each month up until April sorted out. Got the Siege of Corfu coming up, which is going to be something interesting, and the Battle of Agates, and the Operation Tan number 2 in March. I've got basically 2 days running, the Thursday and the Friday. I've got lives. We've got in April the Riverine, if not quite Maritime, background to the Battle of Shiloh, which I thought you'd all find quite interesting. And in the 14th of April, RMS Titanic, 110 years on, what lessons were learned? Not what happened, what lessons were learned. And this is, of course, the full cruiser year coming up. So still haven't quite decided what's going to be on the 29th of March, the 31st of May. There is a comment, a post on the community section of the YouTube channel that you can go and put ideas on them, but it's for the 29th of November, the 30th of August, 31st of May, and 29th of March. And of course, on Monday will be the second part of the long patrol for the ports and dockyards. Right. George Newman, Mumbai Maersk, grounded off the German island of Wangarouge. Ouch, that's not going to be good. Right, thank you very much, everyone. My voice is starting to go after a day of teaching and talking a lot and this. So I'm going to go and walk the fluffy research assistant because hopefully he's recovered from his visit to the vets and would like a nice wander now. So thank you very much, everyone. Take care and have fun. Is the Siege of Corfu the one that leads to the British holding the Ionian Islands off the Greek coast? No. This is the Siege of Corfu from 1798 to 1799. Have a look it up, but you're going to enjoy it. Nice, Aaron. I think the Ninghai class, they don't deserve obscurity. Well, please go put it down on the community post, and I will be quite happy to get to it. Take care, Jack Ray. Thank you, DG40. Thank you, Bichon, Josh Shea, Dep Squad, Knight 681. Thank you, Jonathan Burrow, Nautical Wolf, Animal Beatty. Thank you, George Newman. Thank you. Thank you, Jess P. Thank you, Derp Squad. Thank you, Seneca Nero. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I hope you've had a good evening. Hope you enjoyed. And yeah, thank you. It's always fun to be joined by you all. And yeah. I enjoy these. Take care, everyone. Thank you, Derek Richards. Thank you, Abelowski. And thank you, M35 Benefits. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Take care. And the patron vote will be going live tomorrow. So if you've got any more suggestions, please put them on tonight, and I will look at them before I make a decision tomorrow. If you're a patron. Take care. Thank you, Messiah Slavic. Thank you, Desert Foxo. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Thank you, Grace Salsky. Hello, Melanie 6040. Sorry, just finished. Take care. And thank you, Sean Mack, for adminning. Well, for wandering around. I think you were being adminning. It's just stop. It's just giving you a spanner next to you rather than the blue thing you used to have. I don't know. Take care. Thank you. Night, Oliel, and night, Calvin Gaswork. Take care. Thank you, everyone. Take care and have fun.